차가는 정수사. They're saying it's really good.
Good, I'm sure that it is. Okay, so like I said, the first thing that I want to share with you is this short video about the production of protein from DNA.
Tagalagi toya thangpodi any DNA ne keswe DNA ne ani tize yana tikar khande sugi metungi is protein na khara tikar ro.
And this video it's less than 3 minutes long.
Okay.
So we'll watch it once, and then we can see if it's beneficial to watch it again, maybe with additional translation, then we can do that too.
Ta gala nyendong shtung ro. Nyendong di DNA ne an tize tikar khande sugi mere. Nyendong di kam sumle ringa de syo mar sro ne. Mazu thangpo chesang jikta. Andene yandi poroliya 아니 니워스다 전에 가지고 유르기 치고 여배나 아니 가지고 내 치워스라 방모 차상님도 직다야 된다. Yes.
Okay, let's take a look at this video. I think and can you see this okay? Just checking the video. Yes. Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Here is a cell, the basic unit of all living tissue. In most human cells, there is a structure called the nucleus. The nucleus contains the genome. In humans, the genome is split between 23 pairs of chromosomes. Each chromosome contains a long strand of DNA, tightly packaged around proteins called histones. Within the DNA are sections called genes. These genes contain the instructions for making proteins. When a gene is switched on, an enzyme called RNA polymerase attaches to the start of the gene. It moves along the DNA, making a strand of messenger RNA out of free bases in the nucleus. The DNA code determines the order in which the free bases are added to the messenger RNA. This process is called transcription. Before the messenger RNA can be used as a template for the production of proteins, it needs to be processed. This involves removing and adding sections of RNA. The messenger RNA then moves out of the nucleus into the cytoplasm. Protein factories in the cytoplasm, called ribosomes, bind to the messenger RNA. The ribosome reads the code in the messenger RNA to produce a chain made up of amino acids. There are 20 different types of amino acid. Transfer RNA molecules carry the amino acids to the ribosome. The messenger RNA is read 3 bases at a time. As each triplet is read, a transfer RNA delivers the corresponding amino acid. This is added to a growing chain of amino acids. Once the last amino acid has been added, the chain folds into a complex 3D shape to form the protein.
Okay, well, we'll come back. So I know that there is a lot of information in that video, and I still wanted to share it just as a refresher of the process and some of the key terms.
년동 텐데디 나올이야. 내지 망고 쉬우지 밖에라 하고 요스라. 얘네 비디오 년동도 때야 돼. 김제 조지 카르라나. 규림로디 칸데로레샤. 안냠도 냠도 대단 저와 여기 타녀 되게. this any washing a chair yes.
And so I think what we'll do, because we do have time and we're going to revisit some of the terms in the video, is this time I'm going to play it again. It's less than 3 minutes. but I'm going to turn off the sound. And then that way, maybe Dunju, you can kind of like highlight some of the key terms just as it goes through.
다게라기 양자고네로 년통 시등도 있어. 근데 년통 다른 잠에와체 아니 디왈 뷰이도 샤르고도 현저기 타니에 되길라 가르카르라도 아니야 와리 가르셔도 디 로야. Yes.
And just like I said before I play again, you can keep in mind that you don't necessarily need to catch every single little detail, but just in general, if we can get the key terms and know what's happening as the DNA uses information to make this protein.
다 랑안저 년통 디디요디 년통 디나로리 여 니주 창마지 키라지 신고 말했어. 찍다 레레레레 친데 챙고요 말했어. 니주 닝도로디 카르샤 와 유림로디 카르샤 대단 대와 여기 타니 카르카르카르도 디게 데스식싱나. 와.
Go one more view of this video. Yeah, but yeah, if there's any key terms to sort of highlight as it goes through.
타니에 되게로 와. 수봉 세시도 와.
Right. So there we see right there is the protein. And what I'm going to do now is I have a small addendum that before we start our main lesson for the session to talk about how proteins relate to how we're actually able to determine sometimes the common ancestor.
땅안 저기로 와. 디다 저와 기체니 단다 디나를 사마데 디세스스 와. 디세 디기양 칸데스 싱가조이 메부직규르디 칸데르도 야 델레야 따야지 용구요레스. 캐세. 디세 코랑기 칠레당 입다 든절레 시샤네 간절레야 메부직바레 되면도 야 메부시바 마라르데 따지교라 메부직세야 칸데스 요메데 디기 yes.
Yeah, so this is related to the question that we had in our first session today about how when we look at those phylogenetic trees, how are we able to actually know that all these different organisms that seem so different did have a common ancestor?
단디 아니 내주디 당긴기 소두디 나올이야 아니 아날라지기 심제든지 상모 마다 슈주여 있나야 가줄이야 메부직 요레세야디 칸데스 용구 요레세야지와 칸데스 타 추투레세야디 탑럼로도 마슨 찍디 지제다 지젤라타니 가주직 타 주여지 용구 요레스.
And to do this, I'm going to share an example with you. It's actually from the paper so this is my name here, the paper that I published when I was a graduate student.
디디 단다 gel라 단다 봄봄바 나가심비갑도 아니 랍터 디 gel라기 쩨솜 디티브레스 더 gel라기 챤델이요 캘시 그레이도아 캘시엄 그레이디 gel라기 챤다 딘조 상마 셴바 티로 칭에레도 자 디쩨솜 디강리아 아니 gel라기 치이스 디다 제와이 주치. Yes.
And we will not look at the whole paper, but I do want to show you just one figure that's right here.
Piri mangbo yorosine dinanglo da jawa yugi piri chiran jiktungi is gelagi chesam nanglo gi piri. Yes.
And we just watched the video that showed how the information from DNA is used to make a protein. And what we're looking at here is the protein sequence for just one specific protein.
다 나주지 카리컬라나 DNA protein kandu sugi meta imba thangi DNA ne ticker kandu sugi to imba swa kelagi dalate di ticker ki phangre mi sarwa di indita simje mana leya kandu stick 총자로 도 마선데 카리카리 제대로와. Yes.
Each of the letters that we see here represents one amino acid, and amino acid is one of the key terms we just saw in the video. Is a bunch of amino acids together will make up a protein.
다 디로와 딜라 이기 라면도와 이기 방림도 먹보도와 딘저 상마 이기 찌 가르치는 거래 아메노 규르지 찌 챙겨레스. 당기 인도 나올리 텐샤 유게 타니 찌 개체 찌 가르나 아메노 규르지 챙겨레스. 그래서 딘데 인도 레레레레기 아메노 규르지 챙겨레스. Yes.
And the thing that I think is really interesting is when you look at these letters or this sequence that is there in all of these different organisms, so human, bird, frog, fish, fruit fly, that it actually looks pretty similar.
다 gelagi chesum di gyune ene neju yamsen boji karathong yola na simje ramena pension di mirdo di chiure di backpare di nyare di dangbure kese di dinzo sangma nanglogi di phangrimro do masanta yondi mangche ji chik pareshas dedwa. Yes.
And this is part of the evidence for why we say there is a common ancestor, because even though to our eye, all of these organisms look really, really different, when we look at the molecules at this molecular level, we sometimes find these parts that are surprisingly really similar.
당아주 또 심제 벤차스나 미다 또 백바다 딘조 권신 두스테바나 심제 bat 마라로 주요 왔으라 디인두 디기 내주 딘조 아니 간주 메버치기 바 콩게기 체도 빵다로도 마서 베지당 두고 요랬으라 심제 마라 슈지에 왜냐 간주 두들기 림발에 따송디 모레큘러 란 카레 두들기 림발에 따송디 총배차 요랬스 딘조 때베나 진 총자래도 딘데 도도 딘데 니 요랬스 간주로. Yes.
Yeah, so that's just an example from some of my own research that I did. So I wanted to share it with you because I spent about 5 years or so doing research.
Yeah. 아니 티 gelag이로와 gelag khorangi chemba nyam도 nyamle체네 제좀 다 제바체 아니 제바체 교육이 좀래데 맞지 좀나 뜬거로와 디 아니 템베인스 gelagi 뜬데 총송 가진라데 디 제좀 디 티야 거라라베 gelagi longas leasis.
Okay, so now, like I said, that was spontaneous. I just added that in to respond to the question, but now we can start the lesson that I had originally thought of for this session.
Da gela di yapushu chungso skachin lawe na wanchina dangi ngwe ya len ya de nang ya gela di thanda chesum da jawa yu di she mesra ine ta dinga ju she che dinga la khane yap chine ta ngan zo lup chen khare chashi ngone yim bati sodu di nang ya she de le ya ma jugi sra yes
Okay. Oh, actually, before this is the start, but we're going to start out with talking about DNA. And I have organized kind of 5 important things to know about DNA. But first, I would like to hear from you all. So again, same thing we did, just kind of take a couple minutes to discuss, and then that way you can tell me what you remember about DNA and see how it matches up with my list.
Tang zo lup sen go zu yun de gela yin won sin da DNA da jawa yu ne ju ke che nga ju thadi chi yus ken swe yin ya gela yi ma song ne an la kharan so gi ani DNA ko le ya khari sing gi yu khari thing gi yu di gela khen de yu su khon de do se jang ngan ju kama chik chigring gal ya pha ju thudur chi ani ngan ju pha gela la en dar wa ya thudur na da DNA kan khatan da ba da khari jang yi khari thing gi do 로 ngama 장교 있네 저거 인지 비지 당 거 말해 It would be so great if you can in person so that you see all the discussions going on. They worked really hard for the last 2 weeks, you know, and now working hard.
I'm doing my best to imagine I'm there. I can feel it a little bit. Yeah, so I wonder maybe for these, would you all be able to make even a list on the board of some of your ideas about DNA, like maybe just right or but yeah, a list on the board.
아니 this way. 아주 두들체 this way. 어디 땅아주 직스니스키로와 아주 DNA 거를 가르친 것도 야 gelala 슈엔다 양다 나송에 탑시 시셔. 아니 DNA 거를 가르친 것도 가르친 게 가르친 것도 Oh yeah, we have a nun going to respond what she remembers about DNA. Yes.
코코바 간데 주민 안에 두자 간데 주민다 안에 ngazuita kandara suponangla thapu chelen gewa yora kyamito di changma yin nanglola ani deni yopatang
nangdo sumche
ani ya ngazu thapung di chu karchana deni zodio jama ya no tu mangpa shorkera no chunju shorna ani neka ke mare choro shorna ani mi wangbo junjenda ene chungere do ani DNA de jo tache chebala tene ani ta susui rikyun de kande me cheba cheyala ani de
so she has so many points one thing is so she says we have so many cells and every cell contains DNA another one was the mutation that happens, the slight mutation in the DNA won't affect much, but a bigger mutation leads to disorders, like genetic disorders. And then one thing was like we can use the DNA in order to see to track our inheritance, hereditary basically. And then then also, she said she has learned, she has learned about the structure of DNA and the constituents, like what makes the DNA.
Oh yeah, we're gonna look at the structure here soon.
And it is gune ninga zo DNA ge kubala taginda sra. Yeah, simpachigi we. Yes, aninda. 아, 아. Mm-hmm. So she said, since the DNA is inherited from parent to offspring, if we have a baby who wants to, in the sense, a person who wants to find his parent, or the genetic tests, we can be done that too, through using DNA, basically.
Yep. Yeah. So that's a great idea about some of the applications of the knowledge we have about DNA. Yeah.
디드 간저 DNA 관련 내주 신비기 아니 메진낭을 꾸주치 표주직 차유레스라.
Maybe
왜? Sorry. Yes.
let's hear from one more, and then I'll share my list too.
Okay. Yeah. 아니 다 타마직 아니 게라이 못히는 단계 yes 아니.
DNA lady ani korangi sodang dana soibdira ani kenza yegyo dawra kenza ngine daw yegyo di ani korang yang ani pablen jena DNA la RNA di ani mRNA ani di lakso bola pablen je yoje ani DNA lady ani tabung thamjigi ani tedul nangla yoje ra tedul nangla ani tabung jigde ina ani pheri tabung jigla ni tamne yegyo dawji tengidura ene daji ani DNA lady ani pena ani rigje gyune yongge dira phamani nakbo daw yena ani pugu yang ayana nakbo daw yana taring ba dai na pugu taring ba daw dang yang ganda manda phama mena yang mewoine ra chik ani gyune yongge ji.
Okay. So she has few points too. So she said the structure of DNA is helical in structure, and then she said due to the inheritance from parents to offspring, like traits such as the complexion or the skin color and the length of the hair can be seen in the child, like similar to parent. And then she also said about the DNA is packed in nucleus in almost every cell. And then she mentioned about the unicellular, I think the prokaryote cells where there isn't like a discrete, a nucleus as such.
Okay. Yeah. So these are also some great connections to cells, which we're also going to talk about during this session.
Yes.
All right, so let me go ahead and I'm going to share the list that I have with you now that you've shared your list with me. So I think we'll see a lot of similarities, and just, I have my list organized into 5 important details about DNA.
내가 아니 nga직 나올이야 DNA 코드 대와 여기 내지 nga직 아니 그래기 될이야 방림치니 디기였어.
Okay, so the first one, and this I think we sort of already mentioned this one, but really all the organisms that we know about have DNA as the genetic material. So even when the organisms look really different to us, some maybe a worm, maybe it's yeast, maybe it's a person, maybe it's a dog, but still all of these have DNA as the genetic material.
당보디 가르쳐열려나. 맞아 기믹 나올을 예심제 된 줄로 만다 슈즈 난거 여베나야. 밭 코나 찍을 밭 만다 난거 여베나야. 심제 내주 창마기 립지기 줍자디 DNA 차겨레스. 캔세. DNA 벤차샤나 디나올을 얘기를 지신다 부신다 안데 티도아. 디인데 다 심제 내주 때 용나 만다 슈즈 난 그래서 맞아 믹 나올을 밭 코나 만다 로지 인교 나와 열때 마 띵띵 라따 용두 아니 콘저 창마 이릭지기 줍자디 DNA 차겨레스. 따디 DNA기 제와 여기 내든 당보디르도 와. Yes.
And even just this gives us some evidence that the organisms we know of today all share a common ancestor, because DNA, this is complex, and all the processes it goes through is very complex. And so just that it's the same in all these different organisms at least starts to make us think that maybe way far in the past there was a common ancestor.
또 디네도 찍들와 벤치다 심지어 창말이야 릭직이 춥자 DNA 요대요 주라 또 디디 DNA네 진짜 땅 곤욕으로 드래게 고주여레스라 디인데 디 춥자 찍바 임바 디 코나기 니주 디기 먼저 칼찍 삼만 땅 주고 열라면나 알레 ngazo ngoma 되어 jir라 ngazo 창마 아니 메버 찍니 중위 인사르다 세 주라 다 디기 삼만 땅에 시 샤사디야 찍차 열레스 릭직이 춥자 찍바 인자 DNA yes.
Okay, so number 2. And this we talked about before, and we know that DNA is composed of these 4 chemicals, and we usually talk about them as A, G, T, and C, and it's the order of the chemicals in that sequence that the information we need.
그래 깨듯이 직직해야 돼. 디 글라이스 깨듯이 해야 돼. 야고시라 고문. 다 디디로와 먼저게 안에 이게 내 시교지 그래서와 먼저 주들 시스템 바지레스 DNA 디 A G 와 안에 ADGC 도와 딘조 시기 추비 바체 딘조 시기 방림 레야 시샤네 아니 먼저 examiner 와 추기요레스 켄세 ADGC 기 방림이다 딘델레야 시샤네 인 먼저 examiner 메다 용고요레스 켄세 yes.
And in this picture, we get our first glimpse of the structure of DNA, as was mentioned, and we can see here that it is in this double helix structure.
또 디디로와 간주기 딱 디진다 달시샤와나 탱마 당보다 간주기 릭지기 건다 DNA 끄발랐다 그랬어. DNA 끄발 디피리들 때송하나 가르샤. 켄자 당신도 와. 와. 온데레스. Yes.
All right, we're ready for number 3. So organisms are made up of cells, and so this I think is very interesting and will become really important later during the biology sessions this year, is that a cell in an organism pretty much has the same DNA, even though we have all these different cell types.
또 디디페 내가 디기 내든디 간술롭체 마티스 마 칠리로 왔다 칼라 진죽데 wal리라 디 내가 좀 보자 그랬어 디 칼라나 심제 창마 차봉기 초바 임바체 켄세 에네 차봉기 리 가레 임바이나야 디낭로 차봉기 마라마라 임바이나야 디낭로기 여데비 DNA 창마 할람 더 임바 켄세 고스스베 심제 창마 가레 줍겨레 차봉기 줍겨레스 차봉 심지어 소수 낭로리에 차봉 릭마다 가래로 지으면야 판수의 낭로 다 손데 DNA디 할람 찍바레스. 예세. 어야.
Yeah, so this is a really good question to keep in mind, I think, as you go through the whole biology session of how does this happen? How is it that we have all these cells with the same DNA, but then the cells can have all these differences and more than what we have?
디 세미나를 양해 고에 지워 내가 좀 보직 차기랬어. 그래서 디 펜시는 미 심제로 좀 받다 디 델이야 딘조 상마 가르샤 차봉리 말아래. 그래서 단도 델에 망아 요레스. 차봉리 딘데 망라 임바이나야 단도 릭제 찍바 간데스 디기요나세 DNA 찍바 간데스 용고요나세 티와시도와 디 세미나 양해 고레스. 딱 아주 디 킹의 체리 장애 두주 디링들라. 그래서 yes.
All right, so we've got 2. Oh, there's it been? We've got 2 more. So we talked about 3. Number 4, and this is what we just saw the video of, is that genes are providing the information to make these proteins, and then proteins carry out a lot of functions in the cell and also provide structure.
디디 당긴 년동 따임바. 디다 저와 유레스라. 던제 숨사서 디 던제 시와들달라. 아니 릭종 건다 릭제기 차봉 낭래야 레가 끄지 칭에 현재 레가의 칭에 끄바의 중에 아니 지제디 가르기 중교르라디 릭제기 중교레스 현재 디 지제리야 레가 내가 좀 보니 요래 가래 차봉 낭래기 코랑코랑이 레가 가래 레가 대 치고 그래 끄바디양 쟁에디 지제레 디 수행에디 수엘이야 무슨 니주 쟁에 술라나 릭제 차교레스 현재 yes.
There's a relationship between the structure and the function of these proteins. And a good example is you can even think of the structure and function of your hands. Like you can move all your fingers and things like that. And the structure of your hand allows it to carry out the functions that you need to do on a daily basis.
다 내가 지금 뭐지 갈라나 지지기 꾀바당 칠레니 보러라 항상에 저 상보요레스 켄스베 칠레당 꾀바니 보러리야 저와 항상에 사보요레스 베네샤샤나 가르조 락바도 스테베나야 켄세 락바도 스테베나 락바코랑리야 내가 지겨와 디 입딘데 지겨와 치니 가조 내가 가르치고 디 치토야래야 핑겨레스 켄스베 기시 락바 대다 독도로 시에나 락바 되네 지면 나 가조 락바 내가 제디 용구요 맞다 독도 시에나 디 티지 코랑기 제바당 kuibla dewa samoyores.
Yeah, and so just like this, the proteins, they can be different shapes, they can be different sizes, sometimes they can even change shape, and all of that is what allows them to carry out their function within the cell.
다 제제 코로코를 이비어라서 단계 이비어에 디라 데인데 양 참섬 요어 두디레스 켄스베 지그란지글 마데치네 디 칼진라베나 요어데 요어 두기 치니 아니 간조 차봉낭로리아 코라기 줍고에기 레가 저와 디 줍에기 치도야 입디 요어 두기 데네 용구요레스 켄세 어야.
All right, we're ready for last one on the list. And number 5 is that it will be the genes that are needed in a particular cell type. Those will be the genes that are actually used to make proteins for that cell.
다 내도 나와시도아 디디 카르라나 차봉 수수리야 내가 요디 코랑리야 공에기 릭제지여와 라 디 찍보지 아니 차봉 디낭리야 찌지기 ngol 수규르주여레슬라스 켄스베 당이 갈라서 찌지 차봉 리카레 바이나야 창마 릭제 찍바라스와 얘네야 차봉 리리리리라야 코랑리야 코야리야 고고 로로로거와 레마레 디인두 차봉 링에제식리야 코위 릭제 코나디 차봉 디 낭라리야 아니 찌지기를 수규르고레슬라 켄스베 요제 창마 규르나 찍고 차이로와 디인두 코랑코랑라 가르고도 고율라바베 찌제스야 켄세 어야.
This is starting to answer the question we talked about. How is it possible to have the same DNA in all these different cell types? And the start of it is that all the same DNA is there, but it's used differently.
땅한 속에 단계 지워지기 와. 릭제 창마 찍고 있나요? 아니 차봉 마나마나 가는 용을 써야 돼요. 차봉 마나마나 얘는 릭제 찍고 있는 칠레 간을 블로그를 이래서 들 랜디 디차기요레스. 켄세 릭제 차봉 코랑코랑이야 가드 가레 고도 딜라바베 엔 릭제디 페저당한테네 지제수교레스 디치네 가르차요레 이 마라 용하다 칠레 마라 치도에디 켄스웨 디스웨 고스스웨.
So in an example of this, or sometimes the way that I like to think about it is, so at Drepung, there's a nice science library there, and I also know that there's a lot of books at Jingchim Choling, at least since I've been there. And the idea here is that all of those same books are in each cell, but they might not all be used. They'll just be particular combinations of some of the books that will be used, and that's how we get the different cell types.
So sorry, can you repeat like shortly that point? Because
yeah, it would be, so the idea is the whole DNA sequence, that would be like having the whole library. And that whole library is the same in every cell, but they're able to be different because, let's see, I need to go to English so I can see the cell types, but so maybe it would be one collection of books would sort of be used in one setting and a different collection in a different one. And if we think of books as genes, then that's how we'll get the different cells. So it'd be one kind of book would make a muscle cell, and a different one would make a neuron.
Okay. 딱게라 벤차시나 디페르제드와 벤차시나 아주 DNA 차장지 벤조지기나 바치나 샤바이나 벤조기 바로치면다 DNA 나올로야 릭즈페 몽고여와 디디 페테 망부 슈지기와 차장지기와 디 독도 셰비나 만줄 스펜시나 수술이야 코야직 드네 페주당 거와야 탭디 탭 차상 페주당 동말와 고수세 탭 차상 배주당 동마라 내당 고유 찍려야 탭 찍 배주당 내당 신바 찍려야 탭 찍 배주당 그러 내내로 찍바 찍한 DNA 차상 찍바 임바이나야 차봉 코라기 릭 마다리야 칠레 마다 고고 마다 요두 릭지기 차시 마소네 마다 배주당 거레스 켄스웨 탭디 릭지기 넘버로 샤베나 됐어요. 대 마다 배주당에 디 릭지기 차시 마다 배주당 당시래 릭지 차시 마다 배주당 세야 디 지지 마다 주야 되래 켄스웨 디 천ning 아주 릭지 가서 차봉 마다 용구요레스 됐어요. 고쳤어요. 어야 고다가 디교래 좀 저다 벤처션에 데려가다 닝기 샤림 차봉도와 데려야 아니 왕자 차봉도와 디인디 내다 마다래야 배주로 가러 갔던 게 요레스 벤처션에 코기 왕자 차봉기 닝기 샤림라 고야기 디지 배주당 거예요 말와 디인디 칠레를 빠베 디지 마다 아니 저 가서 릭지기 춥자 마다 배주당 게 요레스 yes.
So just if we think of the DNA as a library, you can imagine that. So all the information is there. It's all available in all of the books, but you will only know the information from the book if you actually pick it up and read it. You wouldn't know the information just because it's there.
但当时这不这样，他给别就写完的是，俺说变做的，DNA 七上就有写完呐。俺说他变做七百那소속이 니마 가르쳐줬던 게 되다. 제가 이 내주지俺说따기래 신기를 봤어. 대 태비 여바 잠기 내주 차상 고야 지다 내주 차상 신경지 캡게 말봤어. 그래서 왜? 지금 저기 벤치나 디능 디리지로스는 디능을 릭제 차상 요래. 그래서 DNA 차상 요르다. 얘네 배주 가르던 거래. 코랑을 고야 지다. 코랑을 거기 배주 쳐도 가르고도 디지고 배주던 게 요랬어. 그래서 왜? 어야. Yes.
And related to that, is now, so we've been talking about DNA, and let's start talking a little bit about RNA as well.
아주 당연히 DNA 라디 바스와. 당아서 리만이어디 RNA 콜이야 디스트릭, 라 시기인스.
And so in this picture, we see DNA in this section. And again, just to point out, and I know we talked about it, but to point out with the structure, is here we can see that there are two. There's the two helices that wind around.
당아서 디 꿰바레 캐스베 디 DNA 꿰바르도와 디 가르샤 RNA 꿰바르도와 당아서 도 DNA 찍고 싶을 때 왜나 디 꿰바르도면 돼 타고로 오시도와 DNA 나올 때 왜나 타고로 니 요레스 돼 타고로 니 도와스 yes.
And here we could think, so the DNA, all the DNA together is the library. And then RNA will be made just from certain sections of the DNA. And it's just like picking out those parts to read.
다 디디로와 디디 DNA 차상이 배왕도 따와있는 디 DNA 디 차상이 바데 단기 배제 샤와다시 벤즈 차상 벤즈 나 여기 탭 차상이 나바로지 요레스와 얘네야 디디 RNA 디 칼라나 DNA 기 tum부 친지직 수키닐레네 켄세 디기 나바로지 차요레스 네주다 제와요다 yes.
In different kinds of cells, the RNA will be made from different genes within the DNA.
다 저기 차봉 마다 나올이야 DNA 기 차시 마다 직세롱 차요레스 켄세 yes.
All right, so now I have another discussion question for everyone. And I'll keep this up here, but let's do a little review of similarities and differences between DNA and RNA. So maybe everyone can take a minute, talk with each other, see what you think about similarities and differences between these two molecules.
딱 gelagiro gela anila karansolya ani chiwachinjishti insra digang yo mari inayang karlana di karsa DNA da RNA dwa the DNA da RNA barulia 총차 가려래 자외차 가려래 아니 karansu 추들지에 인더스라 하수 DNA 때다 RNAlia 총차 가려래 뒤들 딩이 바로 총차 추들 나야래
right. Do we have thoughts, ideas on how DNA and RNA are similar or different?
땅 안주 주들 채වෙ는 차웨나 DNA RNA디 아니 버롤리아 총자 가리여메 카르카르도 직 니즈들이 웨스 다웨 차 카르카르도 직체 니체 숨르베 adenine guanine cytosine yeba charejastre. So one of the similarities that is mentioned here is both of them contain cytosine, guanine, and adenine. Shemba yuwa tsungwe sa. Diksha sa. Awo. Oh. Onda koma so kalbe jide. Ha. Uh-huh. Kale koma so kuch konda. Chikparestre. E the genie yuwa chikparestre. Shirwa. You the GD chikpares laura. Niga nang luyur laura. So another point is I think it's quite similar, but then both of DNA and RNA do contain A and G, adenine and guanine.
Yeah, and so are any of those nucleotides different?
Manda duesa. Ale. Oh. Kalame. Oh, Uris, somebody? Okay, so the difference they found is in DNA there's thymine, while in RNA there's uracil.
Okay, yeah, great. What about the structure? The structure.
Yes, kubal tewa na kardosa. Jingyaman yide res, jingyaman yang des. Oh, so they're saying one of them. Kagi yang so yeah, so okay, So they're saying DNA is double-stranded, while RNA is single-stranded.
Okay, yeah, great. I've got okay. I think one more, and this one's a little bit more challenging. So, the question is: so within one organism, the DNA is going to be the same in all the cells. What about the RNA? Will RNA be the same or different in different cells of the same organism?
Tadi chiwa dirwa tangi gine den da dewa yorosra. Ngaji kharchang yola na socha chik nanglo liya ani chabung rik manda khaji yobe na ya nanglo gi DNA chasang chik pares. Kenswe. Ina ya kisi socha dagarang jisongwa na ya jisongwa ina ani chabung manda nanglo liya DNA konda RNA di sangba chikwa chayore yana manda chayores. Manda berbe. This way. Oh yeah, they're saying the DNA is same, but RNA will be different in different types of cell of an organism.
Yes, exactly. Okay, really good. So that, I just wanted to highlight that because that's going to be really, really important to keep in mind for the rest of our sessions.
Tadi pe nanga chimbo is dine dundi. Kenswe, di socha kangda simje chigi chabung rik changma nanglo ya DNA chikwa yin yang RNA mada yonga gi ne dundi di lopche khar ta janga go zuwa ne chine chasang jugma di bodo ane sem nanglo yang ye go ne du jigins. Yes.
And then one more review question is, what is this process called where we get the information into RNA from the information that was stored in DNA? So it'd be like,
Okay, the DNA ni RNA la yurgo doa. Kususe, tongode yasisho. The RNA la liya neju kare yoba di sangma kare DNA ni tsu yungu doa. Right? Di gyurim de la karle yume haku yus. Pabla re papshure. Some are saying transcription. Ah. 맞디 차상라 맞다. RNA DNA RNA 니즈 마땅하게 유림될 가르사. So some are saying transcription, some are saying translation.
Yes, I think this usually happens. So this, and it's good. We need to talk about both terms. So transcription is the label we would use for this arrow. So the production of the RNA copy from DNA. And then translation is what we call the process when we make a protein.
당보디 법규라. 자시모. 법슈라. So 당기 디디버도 가르샤. transcription 래. 인지 당로리아 transcription 래 베개기 법슈래. 그래서 the RNA 디지스웨스도아 디디 public 아니 translation. Sorry, 법규 translation. 그래서 니즈도 수규르용 거래. 법규. 디네디버도 슈에래. 디네디버도 니즈 수 가르여바디 수 디지 모를 규르고 거봐. 어디시네. Yes.
And so now let's take a minute to talk a little bit more about proteins. And we mentioned this term amino acid before. We saw that sequence of letters I showed you. But amino acids are the components that make up a protein.
다만 저기 아무 뜻들이야 디기 차셔로 나라야 가지고 아니 디제 거렇게 시기스라 안 디디 제체는 가지고 아미노 큐르제세 디딩은 티시케지 쉐요레스 그래서 다 아미노 큐르제 디 아니 디제 유튜브체 그래서 다 간다 디제 디 가리고 쓰여라나 아미노 큐르제게 쓰여레스 그래서 yes.
And this is similar to how we talked about DNA is made up of A, T, G, and C. So there's 4 options for DNA. Proteins are made up of amino acids, and there's 20 different of those.
다디디 가르다 저거래라 나가서 tangi DNA 라야 A, T, G, C 기 투표래라야 마스와. 디 A, T, G, C 라 DNA 투표래야 자제로도 마스나 시도와. 다 가서 디 디제디 아미노 큐르제게 쓰여레스. 그래서 왜? 얘네 아미노 큐르제리 가져열라나 니슈레스. 그래서 왜? Yeah. Yes.
And just here, we don't need to worry too much about the exact chemicals here, but this is just to show you that so this is showing the different atoms here, and we can see how the different atoms are connected to make these different molecules. And this is just to show that we can have all these different combinations of these amino acids sort of strung together, and then that way we'll get all different proteins.
다디디 가서 시우들 찍다 니다 신고 말스와 디피리도에도 저 가라나 아미노 큐르제 다운면서 가리기 접샤스와 디펜시사 딘데로진바다 디나올리아 아미노 큐르제 찍래야 아니 두들 가르가르 여버세 두디 페조 간데 튀기하셔세요라 디도행 치도레스 세상 딘저 정말 마라레도 니즈 상마 가래 아미노 큐르제 샤요레스 다 아미노 큐르제 마라 딘저 상마 튀기야요 디 가절리아 디제양 마라요레스 캔세 yes.
And in proteins, it's going to be similar to what we talked about with DNA, and that the order of the sequence matters. So the order of ATGC matters for DNA. It'll encode information differently. And it's the same for their protein. So the order that these amino acids are in will then make it different proteins.
따장기 먼저기 디 가서 DNA를 때외나 DNA 나올 ATGC도와 ATGC기 방림디기 개발 수준의 DNA를 개발로도와스 릭젤을 개발로도스 직바지냐 안에 디젤을 때외나야 먼저 탄다 아미노 큐르제 니슈지기와 디 방림 라떼치네 그래서 방림 마라 디겔 때네 먼저 디제 마라 용고요레스 라우요레스 yes.
Okay. This is what I have for our overview of talking about DNA, RNA, protein, transcription, and translation. Or yeah, you can say that.
딱 gelaigiroa thandabadu karkarishso rigze ani RNA, protein, 와 아니 데다 저와 여기 팝슈 팝규 데다 저와 여기 니주 gelagi ma sheyadi degastigins.
So what I'd like to do before we talk a little bit more about cells, because that's the next section that we have, and actually the last section for today, is I just want to pause again so that everyone can think about and write down the questions that they have about these topics here. So DNA, RNA, protein, transcription, translation.
다 아니 디 제기 롭센디 카차게라 나 차분 거차게 예스라 이네 야 딜이야 마조 콩리야 가서 탄다bat 케셰 카르셰레 DNA RNA NTZ체 아니 팝슈다 팝랭 거게 셰임 바스라 디다 드와 여기 캐란즈 양야고네 직 십다 직치 아니 드와 여베나 디 티와 여베나 아니 가서 독주체 기치 티와지 라 니 캐란즈 파조 트드르나네 지고레야 수수수 캐르셰 탄다bat 셰샤 요드 카르카르셰 종 가서 캐르종 로스나나
And whenever we are ready, we can ask whatever questions we have.
Yeah. So you want them to ask some questions if they have?
Yes. Yeah. if
Yeah.
there's
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. That two you na. No. Ale. Okay. Oh yeah. So it was mentioned that all the organisms and all living things are made up of cells, and DNA in all cells are same. And she's saying that if one of like the nun next to her, if their like DNA are same, and if it is same or not, how can we check it?
Okay.
If
Yes.
it's different or not? Yeah.
The first thing that I'll say is, so when we're seeing that it's within one organism, all the DNA in those cells is the same.
난 내가 침부지 가라나라. 미 심제로지나 깡찍 게르 체라바지 그러다. 심제 체라바지기 나올로야 차봉리 잠마다 용구로와. 디 차봉리 상마 나올로기 DNA도 상마 찍버렸어. This way. What's it say? Yes.
Yeah, so it still is the DNA that you have is a little bit different from the DNA in the cells of the nun sitting next to you.
저상 디 키랑을 여기 DNA 주라. 디 키랑이 년업을 여기 안라디기 DNA도 또 식마다 요레스. 그래서 디식 해버려 요레스. Yes.
And with this, I think something that's really interesting is actually between any two humans, it is such a small percent of DNA that is different. There is a little bit that's different, but it's a really small percent.
미 상만 나올라. 그래서 미 임베차네 DNA 개발 용어야디 개발 취지지 마시는 거 말했어. 들려도 딱 미 임베차네 미 사람 상만 로즈려야 DNA 더 만들어차다 총배차 돌선나 총배차 빠트코로 망아체 개발 유유지 마시는 거 말했어. 그래서 취지지 마시요 말했어. 찍버릴 러스웨. DNA 찍버릴 만다. 릭제기 줍자디. 딜라오 마다. 니주 티식 니직 전에 규래 노래기. 칼라라는 미겔 찍으러 와. 미겔 찍는 걸야 차봉 마다 요라. 심지 상마. 알레 원들었어요. Okay, so I think I might have mistranslated or something, but then she's saying that it was mentioned that all living things have same DNA, same DNA, but different RNA.
Oh, okay. So this would be so kind of two things. All the living things that we know of have DNA. It won't be the same for all the different organisms. So it's just in just one organism, that's where we have the same DNA sequence. And then what I was saying is that so everything does have DNA, but it's only the same DNA within each organism. So different organisms will have at least a little bit different DNA.
따디디로와 이직전에 노르교 표시당 얘기로와 디인디 가르라베나 심지 창물의 DNA 요래라 마도 DNA 찍고 요래라고 말했어요. 그래서 심지 창물이야 DNA 요래스. 이내야 심지 찍기 수분 나올이야 차봉 담으러 용구로 말아 용구라. 디 창만 나올기 DNA 찍고 용구레스. 그래서 찍버레스. DNA 요바데나 DNA 찍고 인바디 개발 요라. 니네 심지 창말이야 DNA 요바 강시 이내야 DNA 편수 들여온디 개발 뉴 찍다 요래스. 그래서 yes.
And I think just as an example, so like I said, all the organisms do have DNA, but it's different. If we compare a human to a fruit fly, like pretty different organisms, but still their DNA will be 60% the same.
단 벤처셔나로 심지 이를 빼전 샤웨나. 벤처셔나 미당 아니 정부이바 fruit fly. 정부이다 미다 정부이 돌성와이나. 니가리야 DNA 요바 찍버래. 이내야 DNA 돌용디 야저 죽주씩 찍버체. 야저 10주씩 마다차 요레스. 그래서 죽주 찍버래다 doktor시에나 10주 마다라라. 요야. Yes.
Yeah, so this is just a case that we can see the two organisms, they seem really different. They do both have DNA, but the DNA is different. It's just 60% the same, and then 40% different.
당길로 찍버래. 따심제 니 돌성와이나 DNA 요바 찍버래. 시네 DNA 코나 마다테스 용고요레스. 그래서 때디나로 doktor시에나 DNA 마다세야디 ETSI 방름도 마다 용고요 따. 그래서 DNA 마다 용고요스 벤시나 찍리 심제니리야 야저 죽주 찍고요나 야저 10주디 마다 차요레스. 그래서 심지 찍 나올라. 심지 창말 나와 말해. 심지다 doktor시에나 심지 창말이야 DNA 요바 찍버래. 이나양 DNA디 마다 요래. Okay, so RNA 찍고 얘나 지기도 왔어. RNA 마다 용거에 디칼레메. RNA 찍고 요래라 나 지기도 왔어. So this is another follow-up question for this. Since all organisms have DNA, but different DNAs, right? So isn't it the same? Like, can we say all organisms have same RNA?
Well, it would. So in terms of RNA, the organisms, they do have RNA. So in terms of having a molecule with the structure that we saw, they do have RNA, but this is where it's really important to think about the order, because that's what ends up being different. So it's like the building blocks are the same in these organisms, but the order of like the A, G, C will be different.
tangi ani chwadi chewena RNA sama chikwa yorla na dig was le dra ine ya semla shawa chikhare na simje ya DNA loga yungur se dingi tangi shibana shi ADGC gi phangrim loga yungur keswe ADGC nge nangla yu ADGC gi phangrim de khirang gi rigze ADGC phangrim chikwa chayo ma di kengi ADGC gi phangrim mada we kengi chize dia mada yungur yores keswe ondi che di semba nangla ya shawa na ga chimpores. Yes.
And that the order of the nucleotides, okay, so I should say within one organism, and in one of the cells in this organism, the order of the nucleotides in the RNA is going to be determined by whatever it says in their DNA. So it can't just kind of come from somewhere else. It will only be copied from the DNA. So the DNA and the RNA are always corresponding within.
Konda tangingi chizi logar marda RNA logar chayor konda ta krangiwa benshishna mi simje chigleya DNA chig yungurwa remare DNA delya shisha wetone ADGC gi phangrim ji yungurwa di mi chig benshishna gangsa chig nanglariya te yongdu RNA khari yungur RNA nanglariya phangrim khari yungur tange ATU khare AUG AUCG ba chaza AUCG gi phangrim di khandes yungu yemedi DNA nanglari ATGC gi phangrim khandes leya shisha yores kese di ni khurangi nama khangre do cheni ngal digo se ji rama yomares di phangrim di khari yungu di DNA nanglari ATGC phangrim khari yungu met tingu yores kese delia tune yungu yores chazan dingi baruleya ani chigleya tende ro ta khangda DNA gi phangrim DNA nanglari ATGC gi phangrim digi are nanglari ani AUGC gi phangrim di thaje chagores oh yeah yes.
Think maybe let's have time for one more question and then I'll talk a little bit more about cells.
Ta anila chiwachikle en gelagi chabung kole kamanangesa.
DNA ta mi pargi DNA mini pargi DNA na this gyaja khashi chi gi ma do shema daure song de ra an tin de na zo tan da phama putu yora di DNA gyne ngo sing gi de la da 다 파마 보도든 소 DNA 어디 직방인 배차네 모신 거래 야매나 간데시네 모신 차
알아
파마 보도디
보도더라
DNA 교네디 지르라
kare paternity test oh yeah thank you Tamaji. Okay, so she's asking about so it was mentioned that there's a slight difference between the DNA in humans, right? Like only a small percentage of DNA. So it was also mentioned that we can determine or do the paternity test through DNA. So is it the difference that we see, or is it the similarities that we see that's being used to determine the parent and the baby's relationship? Sorry.
Ooh, this is such a good question. Okay, and I'll talk about it more, but I'm going to first send it back to the group. So what, if you had to hypothesize, what would you say? Do you think that to determine a parent, do we need to use the part of DNA that's similar amongst all the humans, or do we need to use the part that's different?
Tadidirwa chibadi gelagi le majamgi maku iswa kisi kerangi pugi penshana pugi pama anlagi chiwa kalana pama puguni porolia devatsia di DNA guni chidu sia di drave chadelta yore mendo chadelta yore sia drwa keran sugi tagja nange jimbayna 최샤치 샤게 최샤지 요베나 계란소리야 최샤치고 요베나 계란기 따진난디 두리온도 있다 강다 파마세야래야 계란기 뻔빠라 기기르시 파마 아마 기기르시 따야래야 드라베 차디 따서레 민라베 차디 따서레스. So they're saying they'll look at the similarities.
With the similarities. Okay, so tell me how will that work if we are trying to determine who parents are, and if we look at parts of the DNA that are the same in all the humans, how will that give us the information that we need?
Taya tadan shibajik ta benderwa di ta pension the current so chipa yo di tangi larwa tayina yang mi changwa nanglalia ani gaja ta chunji jima shimba sama chikpa laswa di chikpa imba ina ani ngazu chikpa insa del tesona ani ngazu khandes yewa chitu gres ta supama imba khandes rat chitu gres 아. So ya tamba chikpa ina am phamai bara thik reswe. So they're saying that if we look into the DNA sequence and see like huge, like very similar, like 99% of similarities, then we can say that we can do the parent, like we can say this is someone's father or someone's mom, But then if there's a huge difference, then it says they're not like, there's no relation.
Okay. So human DNA, and it's actually even a little bit more than 99%, but between all of us, like all of you in that room and me here and Anna here and everybody, it's actually over 99% similar. So if we look only at that part that's similar, it's probably going to be really hard to tell whose parents are whose, because it's the same. That part of the DNA is the same for all of us.
Taya ngazu di jaja gubju kugul le manga rojta zamling nang le mi manguira mi changma ji DNA je mare wondi pet jaja gubju kugul le has ki chikpa yores deswe di indi chikpa del te na ngazu ko ki phamare sa se di pala ina ama ina khandar se pekala ka kores.
Oh, the thing is that there's so much information stored in our DNA that even in this less than 1% of the difference, there is enough that we can tell the difference in parents as to what you're talking about.
Ta ina yang ngazu dus ta yendurwa chikpa jaja gubju kugul le has ki dawre la na tal jaja chikle nyunga loga chagerwa ina yang in DNA chasan ta yendu dinang la ya ne ju mangu shuju yezang kese ne ju mangu shuju yezang jaja chikle nyunga di kebar di te chene ene yang su phama khagi su pu kaza pu su gi phama khagi resha sedira te chedu yores kebar di kese.
Yeah, and so sometimes, and this is the same thing kind of what we were talking about with the mutations. Sometimes it will be a very small one, just one nucleotide will change. Sometimes it's bigger changes. But what we're able to do is actually track back the inheritance of some of those changes that are different between people, and then we can tell who parents are.
Tang azu kasi tangi nigur se sta imba nigur se di chamsam tinang le ETSI kangchek stroji kheba do dosra khase ya mongbo kheba do jene kheba chimbo su gyores di kheba den zoli yang azu ya matta chene ani yang phama da pu poroliya jewa khardo ka sui phama khasa pu sui phama sore shase di yang azu delia ani shimju che chene azu chedu gyores.
And just to, I have a really quick kind of way to visualize how there is a lot of similarity of the DNA sequence between people. And so I'll show that to you in just a moment.
Ta tiskunirwa gelatungi chisa mi changma poroliya kara ta DNA ta na chungja mangbu shu phen chimbo shu ji badi gelai piri gyune tiskuntengu yenswa.
There is, so this is online, and I can put the link to this on the Google Classroom also. This is spontaneous, so I didn't put it there beforehand, but I will share this link with you.
Sure. Dirwa gelagi thandara chagen ta yenswa di thazik di ngaz zinda thage khasa zinda nangla ya gelai luna digreswa. Yes.
And it's a really interesting website that it's a collection of all the information we have about the DNA sequence in humans. And you can actually look at the DNA sequence chromosome by chromosome.
Tangazu dirwa di thazik di nangla khari gerla di mi nanglo liya ani DNA gi phangrim jiwa tangi ti khari me changma tengyo reswa DNA phangrim dia ani ngazu chromosome re chinta tu yores 최봉 건다고 최봉 다 두 개랬어.
And right now, what we're looking at is the X chromosome. And this might be familiar for when we talk about the genetic sex of a baby, that there can be the XX chromosome or the XY. And that's what we're looking at here is the X chromosome.
당한서 될 때에나 디 추봉 X 차려랬어. 디 추봉 X에 디 고연된 간서 인연에 내주지 가르장 열렸나 보지기 다 포이나 모인시에 디 모인바나 XX제 모인바나 포이나 XY 와스라. 디 나올기 때 강다 디 X 추봉 차려랬어. 간서 단다 따야 디. Yes.
And you can see there's a lot of things on here, but what I wanted to show you is this line where it says human, and you can actually see the DNA sequence here for this particular part of the chromosome.
Dele yang azo mil, dele nije mong shudo yene ta gosa diriswa, dele mis lan te yores, chense. Dele men te yende di nangla kare yola di tangi chebongi chashi, tangi chebongi gi chashi chinjujigi nangla le ya ane ADGC gi pangrim, chense. So ting yores.
And this is, yeah, so here it's really interesting. You can, on this website, you can actually just click and move and just continue seeing the sequence. And you can do this for any of the human chromosomes.
Tadi di gelagirwa di to di gali ya chikne ba na thande zoya me wadan yongdidwa. Yongdida di indi kerang ki chromosome khagi dam ba na dine ro chikpa chikya ADGC ki phangrim dine di gi thase dine ta thures. Kensa? Yes.
Yeah, so I just think that it is really interesting to actually see that it has been studied, and people, they've actually found out especially for these parts of the DNA that are the same between or among all the humans, then there's actually a website. We can just go look at the sequence on this website.
Tadi kalau neju de masane yamse bu shuji restaurant azu rize kan ya de jang tu ya wa kan shi en chazi de ya tro chine ne so gi ta chubung re nangla ya DNA ki chashi khawa le ya ne ADGC ki phongrim khare khare re se ta tu ya res tang standa badu project ta ra ya res ra.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think we've still got about 15 minutes, and I just want to share a couple of slides with you about cells. And then I think we'll still have time at the end in case there's any last remaining questions.
Tanga jogam jang slashes ra din anglo ya gelagi ene chabung da jawa yogi ene de nyeri kashish tingi ani ya tuju chungwa na ngazu chiwa challenge na digres ra.
Okay. So we'll do a brief review of cells here, and I will say that part of my goal is to show you that there's these different cell types, and I just think these are beautiful. I really like looking at these cells, and so I thought I would share them with you too.
Ta gelagi chabung da jawa yogi peri din lu do adnang la ta chik di ene gelagi di ko tyen goya gi migi ro di chik di khare la na chabung rig mara yor de se chik tyen ya che ni wadi gela khora chabung le ya ta de hang sa ya ning jim thong gu dos yam sem bo ro ngochar chen ro thong gu yes ka du yim be na di indi gela khora ina ya chabung le ya ta pe go yes di chine ya an la chara chik ting gu yes.
So we've been talking a lot about different organisms, and for these slides, I'll show you some examples of both plant cells and animal cells.
Tangan zuirwa chabung tasimje ramare gore ke share your restaurant ina yang dinang lo le an gela gi chabung di zixing dang simje ni ga chabung tingis hensa.
And with these, you can see even within the plant cells, there's different kinds. And a big thing just to highlight here with the plant cells is that the plant cells will have these rigid cell walls.
Tarwa ani zixing kora yang kalau orang zixing mara le yang chabung mara yung restaurant. Ta di zixing nang lo gi kebar chichu chik di kalau zixing gi chabung sangma le ya yung ro che ani shemba simje gi chabung da dor sangwa na kebar chichu chik kala na tanda chabung gi chishen do cell wall hense cell wall di yores dela ani ro sto ngode ngode yores. Yes.
That cell wall is different from what we would typically see in animal cells.
다단기 치신 sto cell wall di ani simje gi chabung da dor sangwa na manda chagores. Yes.
And these are some examples of animal cells. You can still see that there's a variety of different types of cells, even with the animals here.
Tanase didi simje ki chabung chagyores. Simje ki chabung nangloli imbayana ya chabung ring mara yo kerang tongures ra.
And just as a sort of quick review of a couple of the other terms we've talked about, is that in this picture, so the one that's on the left labeled A, we can see where the nucleus of the cell would be, as well as the surrounding cytoplasm.
Tangan zurwa tanda ngene sheba nangshingi tanye kashe jarjong chebe na di chabung che e di na tebe na di nangbushwa. Di chabung ji ki karsha gyore tening chagyores. Kese nucleus chagyores. And di delia tagorgi di delia cytoplasm chagyores ra. Anjo shena chasu onde chagyores. Shena chasu chagyores.
And in these microscope photos, the cells, they've been kind of dyed with these different colors, and that allows us to visualize these different parts of the cell.
당어서 됐을 그래서 네 차봉 말아든 최 말아기 ene 최 주셔랬어 최 말아도 가시 가르쳐 벌벌도 가시 정구도 근데 네 가르치는 지기열라 네 먼저 최 주에도 최 동에도 가신 비슷한 게열라도 가족이 차봉 코란기 낭로기 왕타되게 아니 차셔되게 추 뭐서 되고 차야겠지도 계속 네 전에 가서 네 비슷한 게열었어.
And sometimes I think of it is then it ends up being this sort of, it's this combination of, yes, it's science because we're looking at these cells, but it's also, in a way, it's art, right? Because we see these beautiful colors and we're able to see what these cells look like.
당한지 gelai kadu kata samsam gelai na yon dikapsu semna na khare do share gudlana di cheri gi takchi jiga res ra yene yang chondo da dendre yang ib da kubada dendre mara cha yon di gyuze gi rig jiga re tingus ra remove gyuze ro jimba na delia chön da ya da ib so ya da damara jiyor wa di yin di dendre naga damara thong yon di gelai sem nang lo ya cheri gi thone da dang ji da yang gyuze gi chani chashe jig do sam gi ra. Yes.
And then just to review a couple of other cell types that you might see as you go through the rest of your sessions this week, is that here we've got a picture of some muscle cells, and you can also see sort of this track runner who would have some specialized muscle cells to be able to run so fast. And yeah, that's the example we see here is of these muscle cells.
다양 차봉 rig 마르시 때베나 해세 심제 나로기 차봉 rig 마르시 때베나 샤네 차봉 차겨레스 그 muscle cells 저도 샤네 차봉 차겨레스라 디디 muscle cells 된 적이 건다 샤네 차봉 된 적이 아주 유야다 된 적 상말이야 아니 배주 단계여레스다 강다른 아주 유야다 된 적이야 카르페스 단계여레 샤네 차봉 배주 단계여레스. Yes.
And another type of cell that I think we tend to talk a lot about in biology and in neuroscience, of course, are the cells of the nervous system. And these are neurons. And as you can see here, there's a lot of other specific kinds of neurons with specialized functions.
다양 아니 차봉 릭지디 카르나 왕자 차봉 차겨레스라. 왕자 차봉 임바 칸 스터디디 왕자 릭베기 나올려야 아니 셰 조직 차겨레스라. 다나시 현재 응하는 저기 가라하고 올라디 아니 왕자 차수 코라 나올려 임바야나야 릭마다마다마다 칠레라바베 릭마다마다마다 요바 지금 저 하고고레스. 괜찮아? Yes.
And another example here are some types of cells that go into this category of connective cells. And so this would include blood cells, and that's some of what we see in the picture here. But then other kinds of cells as well that make up things like the bone and also fat cells.
다디디 릭직 디칼라나 튠주르기 차봉. 괜찮아? connective cells 튠주르기 차봉 차겨레스와 튠주르기 차봉 되나올려야 차 차봉 시면 돼. 디디 튠주르기 차봉 예와 나올려도 다나시 리바체 아니 규바체 다디디 차 차봉기 비리인스와 다나시 다 덴주 상마샤 여레스 디디 펜샤시 나가주 구교 당해야 돼 덴주 상마 용야 망보직 아니 튠주르기 차봉기 체인세네 용고 여레스. 괜찮아? 수고 구교 당해야 돼 지금 예나레 된 상마.
Okay, and then, or I guess I don't want to share, but just I wanted to share also those different cell types with you so that you can sort of refresh on the different cell types, because as you go through the rest of your biology sessions, you'll be learning more about how does this happen that we can have all these different cell types in one organism.
Ta gelagi dine mali thanda batu mangche jis chabungi naga kar kayo me ri kar yo me ten so as di kharche ne ten go ene ga chimo chikharla na kheran su ngeni chabung ri dene jigyor jang sares di kyar jong che da nyam du che ne ta di ne ma lob chen labe chama khare la na di rig den so kharche ne manda yong do keswe di chadang ge gyurim di kheran su jang yong greswa di indi ngeni rig di kar re sha se gi ta chik thos raksa do jine ma ta ya chi keswe onde ne chen ne ten is.
And then just to sort of tie everything together today that we've talked about and relate it to what you'll be learning the rest of this week is we talked about how in evolution we have a common ancestor, and now we have this whole variety of organisms that are out in the world. And then one other thing that I will say in a minute.
다 단다버도 상마 다 로종 단다 지름딘 럭하자 초디 딩이지와 딩이버를이야 셰교디 상마 때베나 당보유는 가서 폐교리벌이 때베 바스 폐교리비게 나로리야 낭던이부디 카르라나 아주 상마 매부직니 충구를 요레스 얘네야 단대 찰라다 손디 잠링디 나로리야 심제 남이 나초 계스웨 드네지 용디 요레스 온디체.
And then now we'll be talking about each of us, just as our own organism. We started as a single cell, and now here we are with lots of different cells of lots of different types.
다스 미게르직 때베나 계스웨 맞아 미게르직 림발 때베나 맞아 당보 소소 르버디야 추병디 맞아 처봉 짱대직 나바시네 티부 추비어레스 근데 간소야 페리페게로 침부 차시네 다 단다 뒤줄 때베나 간소 수부디 처봉 망보기 추바임 바칸시 처봉기 직 망보지기 추샤교지레스 계스웨 더 디니디 총주에 gelagi 직식 야 체사진 따사직다 야 게르게린 발이야 따사직 예 온디 치게서 yes.
And so it's just in both of these cases, we either started with a common ancestor and now have lots of different organisms. And for us, we started with one cell, and now we have lots of different cell types. I think it's interesting to sort of think about the relationship between those two.
다는시 딱 gelagi pension 당기 나와듯이 점링디 나올리야 심지 망고 슈주여레 되네야 콩딱야 대성와에 나가 창마 매버직의 중에기 릭바로디 체 tatanda jebena simchen na choko mangbo juyo dewa gi rikpa didang ngaran zo yin bena so so me jigin bana tangbon yin de chabung jigni go zu chini ani pe kebe ro chini tanda ngazo subu de chabung mangbo chuba yin ba kanshi chabung ring mangbo gi chubyo dingi gi paroli ya 총자 로 때 yin de nga pe yamse mo tonggu yes kela te bana ning jim shu tonggu yes ra.
And so now we've got about 5 minutes, and so I'm happy we can talk about questions, have discussion, whatever would be most helpful. We've got just kind of open 5 minutes or so here.
잠깐만 하셨어. dinanglolia yana chudur che inare yana chiwa chile na yana gela khare na na jigi yoswa. Yes, chiwa yonge inare samju shenge na.
di 제니 ngazu pena ngazu suppo nangla ane chabung recommenda mangbo yorara dinangla ane 제니 ane changma rikchikpa dawle
미치기지라 거다.
미치기라 다 미치기 나네 게테라 직바이나 ane pena ni lakwa dupchege DNA yora ane kama dupchege DNA ane ane 직바 차고라라 dawde 직바 차고래 게테 차나 ane karjana notru chenara
So her question is regarding so it was mentioned that in every cell of an individual, the DNA is same. So which means the DNA in like leg cells and her hand cells will be same. And she's wondering if there's mutation in one cell, will that cause mutation in all other cells?
Oh, these are such good questions. I love these questions. And so I'll say a little bit, but I think also you'll be in store for some good discussions about this in the coming week.
Gelagi ane nisu di chiwa de pe ning jumo yo gelag den chiwa rik den zela go yesra ine nisu tinde jiglagi yesra ine di nisu dinzo halam di je zinda jigli ro khale khale ngazu chudur che jing nang la ya phe chu yung gur ting dos lendi. Yes.
So a very short response for this moment is that it would depend on when during development the mutation happens.
Ta de lend durdush yawe na. Ta de nigur tebe jora. Ne du nigur tebe di kran kebe gi rimba tuzu mana yora. Tuzu kap khadu le nigur tebe we se di khebar su yores. Kese metesh chigle nigur tebe kingi changmala nigur tebe gi we se gi chiwaje mar di lend le ya kran nigur tebe di kran gi sabe che gi gyurim gi tuzu jorwa. Tuzu khadu kap se nigur tebe gi se di gi rali yor ta ji yores. Yes.
So one possibility is that even a mutation could happen in the parent and they could pass it on. And in that case, that mutation would be in all of the cells of the body.
따디들어 벤처시나 두주 예전직리야 벤처시나 두주직리야 결혼 차봉직리야 니규르 테베이나 디 니규르디 차봉 지마니 아니 차봉 그직 셴바 되진 당라리야 규 경야지 용구레스 계속 두주직리야 테베이나
And if a mutation were to happen really early in the development, so for example, maybe when there's a couple of cells, then that mutation will be there in most or all of the cells of the adult.
따벤처시나 니규르디 ngazu chalong chuinde rimba mangbo yorwa ra 당군이 ngazu 가자거래 디 가자 차봉장대 로징바 근데 차봉 용 망로 요라 세상 ngazu 계시 니규르디 ngazu 차봉 카시지마도 매 값수기 니규르지 테베이나 디 니규르디 몽벌 차봉 망고 주교 창만당라리 니규르디 용하기 디 내당지 차교레스.
Yeah, and then this is just different from, let's say, if I go outside and spend too much time in the sun today, and one of the skin cells here gets a mutation from the UV radiation. Most of my other cells don't have that one. It's just going to be that cell or whatever other cells were affected.
따디디 내당 따벤시시나 얘네 디네 당기네 수시도아 디디 ngazu nimachi chilo chinchene nima chaudi ngazu chabungliya tanda khasi ultraviolet sejiwa mukchi wesejiwa mukchi wede poikingi gelagi benshina chashi super chashi ji chabungjiliya nigyur tebe ina yanare di nyeramge chabung khashejiliya nigyur tebe didam nizlogares keswe di kapsu imba na tanda nime nangloliya drochini nigyur tebe dembana di chabung cherabaji yana di nyeramliya khashejiliya nigyur tebe mato subu chabung shimba chasangliya nigyur tegi mares. Oh yeah.
Yes, and so just since we're at time to wrap up, but I will say, fantastic question. And like I said, I had only a very short answer right now, but you will be learning more.
gelagi tandale tundish mashking mesra di zinde choyonde ta ganzo lopse dune chik chasang chora didi gyaja ya ankarangi di koleya nizu manga shingres.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, if there is another question, that's okay. And also, I know that it's late for you all, so we are at the end of our session. So I think maybe I will just say thank you so much, and I'm so happy to see you all, even if it is through the screen. It's still a lot of joy.
아니 땅간수 결혼수 잘래야 치우차요 방에 하고 있어라. 기생아주 치우텔린 채널 디그레 네 결혼수 잘래 치우차요인데 땅간수 대제 진다들이야 참샤바이 나스라. 아니 라리안 아니 결혼수 따 응수 투에요 말했대. 얘네 두스토이데 배가 총송 스켈라로. 뭐야?
Yeah, so just thank you.
So they're saying they are really like happy to see you virtually, both of you.
That's wonderful. Yeah, so just get some rest and enjoy the rest of your week. It'll be really good.
Tane taring gondang yeso yak ke sra ani dundal hang ma dige ani ta cute tang sra nyam do ya. Sa shi. Ya ya.